I see the contrivance in that, and I abhor it, and I love it as well. It's fun. You're playing with nature. You are trying to control it, and by trying to control it, you're also showing how little control you have.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf, and I release weekly episodes with people around the world who share our love of printmaking. If you like what we do, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really does make a difference. Or just tell a fellow print friend about the podcast and they can enjoy it too. We also have a Patreon page where supporters join at tiers that start at just $1 a month, and it helps keep us bringing you printmaking content every week. You also get thank yous like exclusive merch, as well as access to our bonus content, Shop Talk with our editor, Timothy Pauschak. These are quick and dirty tips and tricks with our guests about materials, processes, business advice, and general studio nonsense. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, you can check out the link in the show notes and sign up to hear Tim's chat with today's guest. And if you want to save a little cash and still support the show, you can now sign up for yearly subscriptions and receive 15% off the tier price. Printmaking forever, shun the non-believers. Hello Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, who've been offering a diverse range of high-quality products to your practice since 1997. Products like Arnheim 1618, a high-quality, low-cost paper made in collaboration with a historic paper mill near the city of Arnheim. Our editor, Timothy Pauschak, swears by it for printing lithographs, and our friend and guest of early episode number 4, Miles Calvert, evangelizes its use yearly, encouraging his students to participate in Speedball's New Impressions contest, where they produce work in every print medium. So if you're looking for an affordable paper that can support whatever inky ideas you throw at it, then head on over to speedballart.com to find out where you can pick up the start of your next edition. My guest this week is Delores de Sade. Dolores is an etcher originally from the UK who now lives and works in Koh Samui, an island in the Gulf of Thailand. We'll talk about how experiencing a natural disaster encouraged her to walk away from her Ph.D. in American art history and go back to school for art, the ways in which humans believe they are in control and are mistaken, bonsai, orca, hiking, and the labors of Hercules. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to take a walk in the woods with Delores de Sade. Hi, Dolores. How's it going?
Hi, Miranda. Yeah, good. Nice and chilled.
Good. Well, I should hope so. I've seen where you live. I've gotten to visit you on Samui, so it's a wonderful place to be chill for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's worse places than a desert island to be stranded on right now.
Absolutely. Well, so I know you actually from traveling around Thailand. I believe we first met in Chiang Mai before I lived in Thailand, and I got to know your work, and of course we have the mutual friend and the dear Kitty Kong, and I'm just hoping you could maybe let people know who are listening who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Okay, well, at the moment I'm in Thailand. I've been traveling for the past 5 years in Asia. I'm a making artist mainly, although I do sometimes do other things. My work's based in landscape. I worked in London for many years and felt like I needed a break and needed to go and explore new landscapes and new printmaking studios. My first stop off was in Japan, where I worked with an amazing printmaker called Kaola Masahiro. And I spent a year there, which was fantastic, making lithography and etchings. And then I went to Thailand and happened to meet Kittikong. Saw his studio advertised and went in and met him, and he was lovely. And so I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I moved somewhere more rural, like you said, and now I'm in the jungle, which is my passion, really, the jungle and the wild nature. And I'm just stuck here now.
Yes. Yeah, I think as we all are, that's what we're saying, sort of wherever we are in the world. It's like, well, this is where I'll be for a while, it looks like. Yeah.
Yes.
So where did you grow up, and what role did art play in that time in your life?
Well, I grew up in the Midlands in England, and I always loved art. I loved art and reading and anything quiet that was no hassle and no drama, and I could just keep my head down and ignore anything that was crashing around me. And nobody in my family really was very interested in art. My mum, because I liked art, would occasionally ask me to make signs for her for her workplace, you know, if they were going to be closed early and I was terrible at that kind of thing. I'm very clumsy and my handwriting is awful, but, you know, artists get labeled with these kind of skills. And so, yeah, I used to make signs for my mum sometimes, but when I wasn't doing that, I would be drawing because it was quiet. I kind of gave it up because it wasn't going to earn me any money and I was young, and, you know, I believed the careers advisors who told me there were more sensible jobs to go into. And I tried different things. I did work as a gardener for a while. And then I fell into an education system that took me through to a Ph.D. in history. And I ended up teaching American history at university. Oh. But popular culture and the kind of fun stuff like Elvis and
how fun.
penny novels and, yeah, fun things anyway. But, you know, it was something I'd fallen into. It was fun stuff, but it was not what I'd always wanted to do. And then one time I was on holiday in Thailand. There was a big tsunami, which I was on the beach, and very lucky that I managed to run very quickly. And the sea where we were was very slow, so we didn't get harmed at all. We ran up to the top of the mountain and we were looking down over all this chaos and, you know, those kind of moments of where you reassess your lives and make some changes.
Yeah.
So I came back and I gave up working at the university that I was working at, and I started doing a art foundation course at a local community college, and absolutely loving just the freedom and the fun and not having to be serious and not having to be in charge, and just played, and then realized I could do this more. So I'm still playing. I just carried on playing.
Yeah. Well, so was printmaking sort of something that you came to then through university, or how did it find its way into your heart, into your practice, and ended up being a huge part of your life?
Well, on the foundation that I did, one of the teachers had some printmaking experience, and he took me off to a little room that was, again, it was quiet. So I could play quietly on my own and get away from the, you know, raucous art students some of the time when I wanted to. But when I really got into it was when I went for my degree, and I went to London Metropolitan University. And I went around all the different universities on their open days, and they were, you know, they all look good. How do I make the choice? I walked around London Metropolitan and they showed me the printmaking room, and I heard two teachers there telling people off in an old school kind of, this is how you do it. These are the rules. You cannot do that. You must do this. And, you know, more or less rapping people over the knuckles with rulers. It was like, you know, Victoriana. But I thought, I'm going to learn something here.
Yeah.
So it drew me in. And I had the most amazing teacher who had such a passion for etching in particular. And he could see what I wanted to do, and he could help me get there as well. And his name was Nigel Oxley. An absolutely fantastic, knowledgeable printmaker who worked at lots of editioning studios in London for many years, and then ended up in this university telling people what to do and what not to do in quite strict ways.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. I fell in love with the process.
Mm-hmm. And then what was sort of, I know your current bodies of work pretty well, actually, I think. But what was sort of your early work life? Did your background in history influence you at all in kind of that transition? Or was it really like, you know, leaving that world behind for something else entirely?
It's funny. I really did leave it behind. You know, everything that I was looking at about the history was American popular culture. And my period was from 1860 to the 1960s. And actually my PhD was on film fan magazines from the interwar years. It was, you know, they were great fun. It was nothing. I went to a much older history when I started drawing, but I think I started from a place of when I was younger and there wasn't really much art in our house. All I could remember was some placemats that had these amazing fantastical castles and places and, etchings from the 1900s, 1800s and 1900s, old explorer engravings. And that idea of the landscape or of art or that was the only presence really in the house that I grew up in.
Wow.
And so I started from that point of just thinking, well, why are those images there? Why were they on our dinner tables on placemats? What are they doing? And what did they do to my brain? And why am I still obsessed with them? Why are these places that I could see then still in my mind, and I still see them? I look out at a landscape and I reconfigure what I'm actually seeing, and I try and reframe it to become this same idea of a magical landscape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've carried on with that ever since. And of course, living in London as well, when I was at art school and after, there isn't much magical landscape really. You have to strain to find it.
Absolutely.
But we all know what a landscape should look like, and we have this idea in our head, and we think it's somewhere else. We think it's so far away, but actually walking around the waste grounds and the public recs and the marshes that were near my house as well, they're quite deserted and ghastly, really. And spaces, but there's small parts of them that are absolutely beautiful. They're still growing. They're still alive. No matter what the human beings that are traipsing over them and dumping rubbish on them do, they still create this beautiful place. This beautiful magic still happens.
Yeah. I mean, it must be, in terms of your practice, in terms of what's kind of going on internally, such a huge shift to go from London to, as you say, the jungle, where you are now. Did moving from London to Thailand, did that really change your practice particularly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when I told everyone that I was coming here, they all said, "Oh, that's amazing. You'll get so much inspiration because it looks just like your prints." And my prints were collages. They were composites of, small plants that I would find on a motorway verge or on someone's front windowsill, or a crack on the floor, that something was growing through, and I put them together to make these amazing landscapes. When I got here, and the amazing landscapes really are like the fantastical images that we've all seen, how can I draw that? That's too beautiful. It's already there. And actually, I'm a big lover of Werner Herzog and his quote about nature being vile and base. When you're actually here, it is gross.
Yeah.
It's not magical. It's angry and violent and overbearing and powerful and awful, really.
Yeah.
So I think I've been trying to constrain it and control it a lot more, and to do that, I've been collecting dead branches and bits that have broken and fallen off and been removed from the jungle, and taken them back to my studio, where I recreate these trees that are twisted and gnarled and kind of Frankenstein trees. The bonsai series are all composites again, but composites of dead branches, broken things, and twisted and gnarled into some kind of reconfiguration that we can see as a tree. And I think the idea of trying to control nature is something which is seeping into my work heavily. We try and contain it, and we try and pretend that we're here and we're powerful, and these plants take over. You just turn your back on them and they're there growing.
Yeah. There's just so much in what you just said that I'd love to talk about even more, because I've always also connected with this idea of the kind of construct we currently have of nature as, it's the place where you go to relax. It's the place that's peaceful. It's the place where you find spirituality. And because that's what I grew up with, particularly I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, that is alpine lakes and mountains, and everybody goes hiking on the weekend with their dogs, and it's just what you do. You go to nature, and it's the place that heals you and
you
gives your life meaning. Yeah. But this really is such a modern idea. And I had a professor when I was in my postgraduate work who did American art history, Dr. Sarah Moore. And one of the things that she would talk about in her lectures was, particularly in the United States, that construction happened specifically through this propaganda with these incredible landscape paintings, these large-scale landscape paintings that people were doing of the West and then sort of shipping back east, Yosemite, trying to basically encourage people to go be colonizers, to go see this beautiful landscape, to go claim it. And that really is a bit of the heart of how, at least particularly in the United States, we're so proud of our natural landscape, and we really hold it up as something that is ours and is important. And yet, she talks about sort of before this really conscious propaganda. If you look at the way even old houses were built, the windows would all be facing the street because that's where the people are. That's where the action happens. There was no building houses facing the mountains, because the mountains, that's maybe what you just crossed. That's what, killed your husband and 3 children on, like people didn't want to be in the mountains. They didn't want to think about them. They didn't want to think about the woods. And now 200 years later, people want the view. They want to go hiking. They have to get the Subaru with the 4-wheel drive so they can go even deeper into nature. And it's just so funny because it's something that I had never questioned until that. Yeah.
It's like in the old years, hundreds of years ago, people would go across the Swiss Alps and they'd put a sack over their heads so that they couldn't be influenced by the wild degradation of nature.
Oh my
gosh. The people would be carrying them in, whatever they used to carry the Westerners across. But you'd succumb to the evilness of this terrible nature. And now it's of course the Westerners, the colonialist narrative of Asian art, the landscape, and how we were strong enough, we could come, we could colonize this nature and take over from the savages. It's all bound up in the same kind of idea of this pretty, beautiful, controlled landscape.
Yes. Yeah. I had a funny moment early on coming to Thailand. I was stuck in Bangkok traffic, which is, of course, part of life here. And I was in the back of a cab with someone who works at the gallery with me, and she's Thai, and she's maybe in her mid-20s, and she was asking me about where I was from and what part of America are you from, that sort of thing, just getting to know you questions, because I think I'd only been at the gallery for about a week. And so I was telling her about the Pacific Northwest, and of course I was telling her about hiking, and I was very proudly showing her photos on my phone of these hikes that I'd been on. And she was very politely looking at it, and then at one point she just kind of stops and nods her head and goes, "Yeah, white people love walking." Like it just didn't connect with her at all. And it was clear that I was not the first Westerner to try and, get her excited about, look at this hill I walked up, I was like, right. Cause it's such a, as you say, that idea of like the Western, the colonization, like it's all there, that like I can walk into the wild and then it's somehow mine. Yeah.
Yeah. The kind of, when you see the pictures of, usually men holding fish, these giant fish that they've caught, like they've conquered nature. They've got this fish. They fished it out of the ocean. It's a fish. Come on, if you can't, with all your equipment and your tools, and you've not really conquered nature there. And I think that's the same. Yeah, the same with the walking out into the jungle. And you can go on a trail, but you're not surviving in the wild.
Yeah, try and spend one night. You. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's actually my advisor at graduate school, Dr. Pia Cuneo, who was episode 100 on the Hello Print Friend podcast. We didn't get into it so much when I chatted with her, but one of the things that she studies, because she studies horses in art, in the early modern period, it's that same idea of the man on the back of the horse is rearing, but he's in control. It's again that I am more powerful than, I'm just, I have to conquer nature. And it has to be, we're just so insecure as these soft little apes, we don't have big teeth. We're not very strong. We really We don't have much to offer actually in the wild, and so we just are constantly trying to make ourselves feel better. Like I tamed the stallion, I climbed the mountain, I caught the fish, right?
I grew a bonsai. It grew in this direction because of me. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I beat it. Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah, because it's when I was hiking quite a bit when I was still living in Seattle, you said it is really, really beautiful, but it truly is. There were a few moments, where you can truly feel that kind of horror that I remember. And one was, I was way out, it's not like I never did anything like insanely ambitious, but I just was on a trail that just wasn't very well used, and I was pretty far out on it. So I hadn't seen anyone on the trail. I'd been walking for hours. And I was there with my dog at the time, and we hadn't seen any other humans. And we turned a corner and she started freaking out. Like she smelled something, I don't know. And then the bushes near me started sort of moving. And all of a sudden it's truly, you feel that squishiness that like I have nothing. I have like whatever is in those bushes, I don't have anything to fight it. I have my dog who's also terrified. That's as close as I have. So there was a moment like that, and there was one moment when I thought I had gotten lost, and it was still like all of a sudden the trees, it's like they change shape on you, and you don't know which way to get out, and they look scary.
Yes.
They don't like, they go from these beautiful, majestic, ancient, wise creatures to quite sinister quite quickly.
One of my earliest memories is watching The Wizard of Oz and the trees in that. Oh boy, they are evil. Yeah. And they do that. They do change shape. They do fool you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So you've moved from London, as you say, you're now in the jungle and gaining inspiration from that. And as we were just chatting, I had a question, and it's almost like maybe sort of a personal question for me. And so you also don't need to answer it if you don't want to, but it occurred to me. So, if I have a phobia in this world, it might be of tsunami. It's a recurring nightmare, actually, that I have. And so you, as you say, you actually experienced that in person, and now you've moved back to an island. And I just find that incredibly brave, because I have never experienced it. And like I said, I don't know why. Ever since I was a kid, I have nightmares, and really the only reoccurring nightmare I've ever had of large waves, of just the vastness of the ocean. But now you've kind of returned to a place where you're, I imagine, near beaches, on beaches quite regularly. And how did that work for you, I guess, is my question, or was it even an issue?
I love Thailand, and I love the jungle and the sea. I've never liked it. I'm like you. I never loved it. I'm scared of it. And seeing a tsunami, seeing how powerful and how immense, and how there is no fighting that one. You're scared in the woods, and there's a bush moving, and there's something, but the sea, the whole sea coming towards you, and just not stopping is absolutely. Yeah, it's terrifying. Keep up with the nightmares, because they will make you more
right?
safe.
Yeah.
So I didn't go in the sea for 15 years afterwards. And I've been in the sea maybe 3 times since. Yeah. I go kayaking sometimes, but I don't swim. But we are in the Gulf here, so it's quite safe. We're protected on either side from any major tsunamis. And I think I would feel different if I was in Krabi, which was where we were for the tsunami. I don't know. I mean, you can't run from your fears all the time, but I do look at the sea it's not a nice place. It's not a nice thing. It's strong and powerful, and I don't see it as a pleasurable, fun palace.
Yeah.
But I love being here. I love Thai people. I love Thailand. I love the jungle. Like I say, I love the weather. There's so many things that I love, and this sea is there. I love watching the sunsets and the sunrises. They're good. You get a good view if you sit on the beach.
Yeah.
But the sea itself, I'm wary about. But it's funny because here, I mean, obviously there's not many tourists at the moment. Most people live here, but the fishermen treat the sea as if it's, it's their workplace. They don't stand admiring the sunsets and the sunrises, and they definitely don't keep the beaches pristine. And it's a work thing. It's a workplace. It's something that's there that they can utilize. And I think I see that here more than when I was living in London, when I'd go to coastal towns and, it would be more touristy.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly now when there's no tourists, it's a different view.
Yeah, I got to see that, I think, a little bit when we were on Samui just for that week.
Yeah, you were here and it was quiet, right?
It was really quiet. There were a few other Westerners, but they were full-time residents like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, we just got to watch the fishermen come and go out at night in the boats with their green lights out on the water. And, you say it's not this sort of the ocean, like, the healing power of the ocean, which is often the attitude that people who don't work in it take to it for sure. And so I think I did see that kind of practicality in relation to the ocean. And I think also, sailors and fishermen are people who also famously have respect for the ocean and have respect for the sea and really understand that it is powerful and dangerous, and that you are very small sometimes in a very large space, particularly in waves or anything like that. It's a dangerous place. Yeah, and not just because of the creepy crawlies that are in it,
There are so many dangers. There are so many things to worry about. But like I said, I don't trust nature at all. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good force. It's evil. The sea is just part of nature.
Yeah, and I think about sometimes, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's one of the many beautifully filmed David Attenborough's, either Blue Planet or This Planet or there's so many, right? Planet Earth. And there's a scene in it where there are orca who are not just tossing a baby seal back and forth, but they're hitting it with the full power of their tail and flinging the live baby seal 100 feet into the air and catching it again and basically volleying this thing back and forth for apparently no reason. And I just remember watching that. I don't even remember when I saw it. It was probably 15 years ago. And I have this perfect memory of it still. And just being like, nature is evil,
Penguins as well.
Yeah.
I had a commission once and I had to draw some penguins for someone. They were lovely. They didn't realize that artists just make everything up anyway. They gave me money for research. So I had to go and research penguins, and all I knew about penguins before that was the March of the Penguins. They're amazing, beautiful, lovely. No, they are child beating, stealing. Oh, it's just terrible. They're thugs. They are evil, terrible thugs.
They're thugs.
The more I looked into them, the more I read about them, the less I had to remember. Just don't think about penguins.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. So I also am really curious too, because you're now you've gone from London as, this is an arts hub. You worked at East London Printmakers, or worked there, is that correct, for a while?
Oh, that's right, yeah. I was the chairperson there for 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was a great time. I mean, we had a lot of links with other arts-based organisations in the area as well. It was quite a vibrant artist community there. With loads of different studios that did different things, like from 3D printing to bike mending or woodwork studios. And it was really good.
Yeah. And of course, London it's one of the big art centers of the world, London, New York, LA, all those attitudes that people take towards it. And now, as you say, you're living somewhere quite rural, and it's affected, of course, your practice, right? Because everything's sort of changed in that way. But I'm also curious if you could speak to just as the kind of community sense of being an artist. Like, did you find that that you've had kind of to shift in that way? Or are you just sort of liking the quiet? And I know that a lot of the really positive feedback I get from the podcast are from other artists who are living outside of the centers, are living a rural life. And they say they really enjoy listening to the podcast in part because they can feel connected. And so I don't know, if you can just speak to that experience, because I know that there are people listening who share it. Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard being an artist making work on your own, and I think that is one of the things that I loved about the printmaking studio, is that I could quietly make my own work, and then I could go and do the printing and be around other people and see what they were doing and feed off the energy that they were the stuff they were creating, and work together. And I really miss that, and going to the galleries and being around a community that just want to encourage the arts and be a part of the arts. So I miss that a lot, but you just find ways to reach out online, and I listen to the podcasts, and they are great. I mean, the good thing about everyone being stuck in the place that they're at is that we have to make these links. I'm listening to your podcast about people all around the world that I wouldn't otherwise get to meet, and a lot of them I wouldn't have heard of. So my artist network has broadened considerably, because I have to reach out, because I have to find a network somewhere. And it's freeing in that way, because I can reach out anywhere. I can talk to people in New Zealand and in America and in UK. And before, I was in quite a small network, 1 square mile really of galleries and artists that were giving each other that support. But it was small. And now it's less localized. It's wider and broader. And it's important, I think, to still keep those links, to reach out and talk to other artists and listen to other artists and feel like you're part of something together. Talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting to think about living in these art centers that actually can be kind of limiting, because you're not being pushed outside of a comfort zone. And you don't have the necessity to say, oh, I'm going to send a message to someone in India, because, it all seems to be at your fingertips. You said, the 3D printer person and the museum person, and they're all right there because you're in London or LA or New York. And and this actually means that the community that you build is going to cast a wider net. Yeah,
exactly.
So I'd like to maybe switch gears just a little bit and talk about some of your series specifically, because there are these beautifully rendered, just absolute, I don't know, they're the ones I know from you are etchings, and you really take advantage of etching's ability to have light and shadow and detail and drama. And some of them, even almost have that kind of photographic quality to them in their preciseness. And yet they're always unexpected compositions. You can tell that this isn't a composition that's been put together and said, look at how beautifully I've reproduced nature to make you feel good, which some landscapes do, right? You see them and you're like, oh, I can see this is designed in a way to elicit a release of, some kind of relaxing chemical in your brain, right? But there is this sort of this tension and this drama in your work. And so if we could talk to the specific, I have pulled up here the Wasteland series. And so maybe if you could sort of speak to what was going on in that way. And then also, I'm also curious for how do you go about taking work that is, people have this association with landscape of being relaxing, pastoral, just purely aesthetic experience, and then sort of creating that tension and that drama using a composition that it makes it unexpected.
Well, I suppose, I do the paradigm of this idyll, this faraway place, this exotic in all those, and all the colonialist connotations that are attendant with that. I love those old etchings and engravings of 18th, 19th century landscapes that explorers would be going off and traveling and finding these amazing places and sending pictures back. And then actually you look at the pictures and you realize that they've completely altered. It's untrue. It's made up. And of course, nobody would believe the pictures of the places or reproduce the pictures of the places if they weren't fitting in with what exists, or if it's kind of like they were like the equivalent of clickbait.
Right.
Like this place is amazing. Believe me, you must look at my picture. You must come to this place. You must control this place. And I think I see the contrivance in that, and I abhor it, and I love it as well. It's fun. You're playing with nature. You are trying to control it, and by trying to control it, you're also showing how little control you have. And so I'm taking these elements that I find that are, I mean, some of them are beautiful. I'll find a beautiful tree, and then there'll be an ugly tree right next to it, and just the way they work together and the way they fight each other, and buildings that are on the side of motorways that you're not supposed to notice when you're actually looking at the landscape with an artist's eye. It's different from driving along the motorway. You see things differently, and I want other people to notice these things. I want them to see the emergency staircases on the side of the motorways and think, what does that mean? That's in your periphery.
Yeah.
You don't know that that's there because you're not supposed to see it. It's not pointed at, but you're driving past it, and your subliminal is seeing that. And what does that do? And what does it do to actually point to that? To change the landscape so it isn't just what a supposed landscape is supposed to look at. So it's not just a pretty place, but really it is quite menacing. And I'm on the fence. I don't know whether we're the problem, whether we're the menacing part of these landscapes, or whether nature is the menacing part of these landscapes. And I just want to have that tension between the two.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's such an interesting question because, of course, when I'm talking about these orcas tossing around a baby seal or penguins abusing their children, we're bringing a human morality to it, right? Of course. You're saying well, as a good person, I would never do that. And so we're taking this completely human-centric construct and putting it on things that aren't human, that have nothing to do with people. Like the orcas are out there living their life, killing baby humpback whales and only eating the tongue. And it doesn't have anything to do with me. And yet I have a very strong emotional reaction to it. Yeah. And so that idea with nature is that if nature was out there, doing things like, I don't know, there's all kinds of horrible things with like storks and how like they have two babies. And if it looks like the bigger one's going to live, they just let the bigger one like peck the smaller one to death. These like.
Oh, the storks as well. They're not cute.
Yeah, I know. It's just, but again, that's a human morality, right? Of course, that we're like, well, babies are precious. You can't just kill a baby because it looks like you like the other baby better, Yeah.
And any kind of morality can be a good thing and it can be a dangerous thing. It can be used either way.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this series, you have a few that are called like the 6th labor of Hercules, the 3rd labor of Hercules, the 7th labor of Hercules. What are those speaking to?
They were all journeys. I was taking journeys. So the labors of Hercules, he was sent off into nature on impossible tasks and supposed to not come back, but he always managed to come back. He always did it. But it was just a reference to this idea of a long journey and trying to do something and failing at doing something and what you bring back from that journey as well. So they're not related to the stories so much, but it's, a way of sort of pointing at the ridiculousness of the journeys that we take through nature and the importance that we give nature and the challenges that we set ourselves, that we will fall off the edge of a path, the path will collapse, the bridge won't quite reach the end of the destination, the stairs don't lead anywhere, but we still keep walking up them. The futility of journeys, trying to get to the other place.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of my grandfather was in the Coast Guard, and you'd always see these sort of news stories about someone who tried to sail across the ocean without a map or tried to climb to the top of this mountain, and my mother would always because her father was the one who was in the Coast Guard, she'd always just be like, that idiot, because she grew up in a family where, her father and, the people that he worked with would have to risk their safety to go out into the storm to save these people who have tried to take on nature in some way. She never bought into that romantic ideal that there was something, good and moral and upstanding about risking your life to do something in nature, because as her father's like, I'm going to have to go out there with a boat and, lower down into the water and get you out,
Yeah, he's just doing it for a wage. He's not trying to be a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's very different. Yeah, he's like out there sort of saving them. And I see that a little bit in what you're sort of saying about how we create these sort of artificial challenges for ourselves. Like I have to climb to the top of Mount Everest without oxygen. I need to be the first person to reach the South Pole while, on a vegan diet or something,
And it's really difficult to come up with those challenges where people haven't done it before.
Exactly.
Because we've all done so much.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find a place that is truly nature. There's always a path or a staircase or a signpost or some, there was one of the drawings in that series was an actual place that I went to that there were big boulders and things everywhere, and I'd walked for miles, and it was in northern Wales. It was a really desolate, beautiful place. And as I was walking, there was this huge boulder in the way, and it just looked like the most impressive, fantastic wild spot. And there was a handrail so that you could walk around the boulder. It was, 3 hours into the hike, and it was in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing else except for this handrail.
Yeah.
I loved that. I loved that there was someone had been there and someone had decided that was the spot that needed to be made safe for all the people that were trying to heroically go where no person had gone before and really find themselves in the wildness of nature.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a podcast series, or it's not a series, that's actually just a podcast that's called This Is Actually Happening. And they did a mini series. It was 2 episodes, and it was about a woman who had gotten lost in a jungle in Hawaii for, I think, 14 days, 16 days. It was something pretty remarkable that she had survived it. And the first series they talk about, they talk to her family in the first version of the worry and the searching, and then all of these just bizarre things where people started to accuse the people who were searching of having murdered her, basically. And, just this crazy conspiracy theories going on in this town. And then they actually ended up finding her, I think at least 2 weeks, maybe more, since she had disappeared. And then in the second one, they interview her about her experience of being in the woods. And I think you might find that interesting, sort of based on our conversation, because she has a lot to say about that. She'd gone in under what she thought was very controlled circumstances. I'm going to go up a trail. I'm going to have a quick run. She didn't bring a cell phone or water with her because she thought everything was in control. It's Hawaii. It's a place where hiking and jungles are a way of life. And she lived there for quite some time. And yet she just all of a sudden went up a trail and could not find her way out. And she was lost for weeks. And, ended up hurting herself and all this kind of wild thing. And all of a sudden, she was really going someplace where there are no handrails. And it becomes terrifying and just completely a completely different experience from, what we think. And, the fact that she was wearing those 3/4 length yoga pants and her just the bit of her skin that was showing, her ankles that were showing, it all just got completely scarred and scratched, just from having that little bit of skin showing. That's, a fashion statement. Again, our silly, soft ape bodies, right? It just, it's oh, branches, I'm going to get scratched, and it's, really, really interesting and, quite a very dramatic tale and, obviously changed her life entirely. And then again, people blamed her for getting lost and accused her of doing it for attention and all kinds of things that humans bring to these situations. Yeah.
Definitely seek that out. That sounds really interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah. And so we've talked a little bit about, in passing, these bonsais that you're making, these in... And so you were saying that the process in them, you're actually collecting dead sticks and sort of creating composites. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Well, why do I do that? I could just draw a tree, really, I guess. Why do I bother? I I live in Samui. It's very hot. I don't like sitting outside in the sun. I'm a baby. I'm a baby soft ape.
Yeah.
So I sit in my studio and draw. So it needs must, I guess. So I collect things and I come back and draw them. I mean, that's the kind of, that's not the real reason that I do it. That's the hardship of life reason. But I love when things are broken and degraded and not appreciated. They're not beautiful anymore, and I can pull them back together and make them a beautiful thing, and that's quite fun. And I can also torture them a little bit. I can control them more. I give up trying to garden. I did that years ago, and you're just fighting against a tide, so here even more so, where things grow so quickly. So the fact that I can take a stick and a twig and a branch and a couple of leaves, and I can bind them together and hold them with some poles and, kind of try and reconstruct them into something that is still alive. I mean, it talks about the actual bonsai process, where you are trying to keep something alive and control nature and make it grow in the way that you want to. And the amount of effort that you have to do that, to get things to grow when you're controlling it yourself. When they would grow naturally, and they do fine if you just let them get on with it. Trees generally cope or die, but then another tree grows in its place. Nature does quite well on its own, but when we try to do it ourselves, it's such a struggle. So I these are really detailed drawings, and some of them are some of the longer ones, some of them are 2.5 meters, and they're just a collection of old twigs that are tied together and drawn in a very slow meditative process. So I'm really trying to focus on the effort that it is to create something from nature or of nature. But as well the nastiness. These are discarded pieces of rubbish. Usually, these are things that have been killed. When they are killed, it's generally due to us, to humans. We've got in their way. We've chopped them down, or we've polluted them, or destroyed them somehow. And that's very sad. It's very sad to see things die here, and it's torturous and awful, and it's scary. So I hope that comes through in the drawings, that these are scared objects as well as slightly menacing, threatening objects. They're going to come back to life and haunt us, I hope.
Well, that's so fascinating to hear you describe it that way, that they're supposed to, the menacing as well as the haunting. And I really think that you've captured that, because a lot of them, they do have this dark foreboding. I think that there's a visual trope that's very, very old, that's of this sort of evil tree, right? The scary tree. You see it in a Tim Burton film, or even in, I think, the Disney Beauty and the Beast, and, just these
Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz again. Yeah. This idea that these trees can be, menacing and evil, but then, there's such a sort of sadness to them in the way that they're being held up and the way that they're being or pulled down or controlled. And so it is like there is that push and the pull of am I being threatened or am I doing the threatening when you look at them?
We're bound together in this terrible agony.
Yes. Yeah. And you can really feel that with them. And they, and again, they have that way of being beautifully rendered. And I remember the very first thing I tried to draw that I have a very clear memory of, and realizing that drawing was really hard and I was bad at it and I didn't like being bad at it and I was never going to try and draw again, was being asked to draw a tree in, year 4 or something like that, being sent out into the courtyard of the school and saying, okay, everyone go draw that tree, and just being like, are you kidding me? Like, just so mad that it was so hard, and just being like, I mean, I'm drawing every single branch. Why does this look like shit? Like, so mad about it. And so, the trees that are really like trees and branches, I mean, for me, they're up there. It's like hands and feet. They have that quality to them where if it's off at all, there's like very little forgiving that the human eye does. That you don't bring a lot to it. Like, you can sort of the person who's viewing doesn't meet you halfway with a tree. Like a tree has to be really exacting. And the way you sort of mix that beauty of the actual rendering with the really emotional way that they move, and of course the darkness, and in the etchings, you have these, of course, deep aqua tinting, rich blacks with the whites and all of it. It's very, very dramatic and very beautifully done. Yeah,
I think the medium is very good for that. I mean, I think trees are good subjects. They behave well. They keep still.
Yeah.
Generally. They don't tend to move too far. They sit quietly. So I like quiet things. So that's
Yep.
good. But also we, like the landscapes, we know what they should look like. There is a trope that I play with. I know what they should look like, and I know what they do actually look like. And somewhere between those two, there is a tension, which is funny and scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's really interesting to go through this very, very old tradition of bonsai as a method to get to that idea, because in a way, I can't think of anything that's a better example of this human need to control nature. And it's the most beautiful when it's the most controlled. Because, of course, bonsai are completely unnatural. And as you've mentioned, that they require truly a remarkable amount of work to hold this shape. And yet they're completely revered. They're bonsai museums. There's people who travel to see them. The ones that are quite old are regarded as national treasures in the countries that own them.
Yeah, there's very famous and beautiful bonsai trees, and the people that look after them are just absorbed by it.
Yes.
You think of trees as growing slowly and not really much taking place, but then I've met a few of the bonsai masters, and they're fussing over these trees all the time as if they're babies, newborn babies, that need constant attention, and often caring for them more than their own children and families, treating them like real family members.
Yeah. I think I've seen that before, because it's they do require that constant love, in a way that, and they don't in the way that even puppies eventually get some degree of independence from you in a few years' time. And of course, people ideally will grow up and be able to work and feed themselves, but a bonsai will never leave you. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, I can't believe it, but we're actually already coming up on the hour recording mark.
Wow, that went quick.
I know. So I always want to make sure I have time to let my guests say where they can be found online in the digital sphere, where people can connect with you and see your work.
Well, I have a website, which is doloresdesade.com. And I have an Instagram as well, which is this. My name is the same, Dolores, DOLORESDESADE. And I'm always open to new contacts and new friends in the printmaking world or the art world. So I'm happy for anyone to get in touch.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put links to those in the show notes, and hope people will definitely reach out and start making more connections. And are you still keen to talk a little bit longer with Tim? Do a little shop talk chat? Do you have time?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was really, really nice to chat, and I'm glad to hear your voice and get to connect, even if we're not really traveling right now in Thailand. It's nice to talk to someone a bit close. Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, but it's always nice to talk about art as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Cole Rogers, co-founder and master printer at the High Point Center for Printmaking in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll talk about starting the workshop, the importance of community access, and making art outside of the coasts. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.